Every news story needs to answer the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but you don't want to try to get that all in the lead. It'll just be too long if you do. Basically, what you want to get in the lead is the most important information or the central point of a story. Think about what actions were taken, and think about what's going to interest readers. For most stories we do, you'll want to write what's called a summary news lead, which does exactly what it sounds like. It's a summary of what's going on in the story. As far as identifying people in the lead goes, there's a couple different ways to go about it. In an immediate identification lead, identify people by name. You only do that, though, if the audience will recognize the people by name. Most of the time, you'll use a delayed identification lead, identify subjects by title. When a lead doesn't emphasize the news, we call that burying the lead. In this example, while it's true that Wentworth County is required to give inmates the same level of medical treatment the general public receives, that's not what this story is about. In this case, it's the fact that the medical care for jail inmates doubled in cost last year because of this regulation. Practically every lead we write will be a single sentence, and leads always follow the normal rules for punctuation, grammar, word usage, and verb tense. You don't want to have it read like a headline. Also, please note we don't need datelines in our stories, and datelines are where it says the city name where a story is being reported, then has a dash before the actual lead. All our stories are assumed to be local. Remember, leads are almost always going to be one sentence, and you want to keep them relatively short. A good guideline is to aim for a lead that's less than 25 words. In fact, the first few times you write leads, it's not a bad idea to count the number of words and see where you are. If you're at 27 or 28 words and it seems like it flows fine, don't worry about it. But if it doesn't flow fine and it's longer than that, you probably want to take some information out. Remember, you can save other information until later. The lead is just supposed to summarize what the story is about. If a lead is too long, the best way to shorten it is by eliminating unnecessary background information. In this example, the first version has way too much information. Remember, you just want to summarize what's going on in the story and save the details for later on. A good lead should specifically describe what's going on in a story. In this example, the first one doesn't really tell you what's going on. It just says the city council passed an ordinance that will affect people in the city. The revised version provides much more information and actually tells you what the story is about. Just like in the rest of our stories, in leads we want to use strong active verbs to avoid passive voice constructions. In this example, in the passive version, the words in italics are basically to be verbs. Remember, we want to avoid that. Keep your verbs active. Remember that readers care about things that are actually going to affect them. So if there's a way to localize a story, go ahead and do so. Even in national stories, there are usually ways to localize them, and you want to look for those. Just like the rest of the story, a lead needs to be objective. If there's an opinion in a lead, it needs to be attributed to whose opinion it is. Otherwise, people are going to assume it's our opinion. Try to avoid calling people quick thinking or heroic. Those are making judgments. And also, on the flip side of that, don't use unnecessary attribution. You don't need to attribute everything. If it's something controversial, you need the attribution, but otherwise, you probably don't. Leads should always focus on what happened, not who said it, where it happened, etc. In the original version, you get 2/3 of the way through the lead before you actually get to the meat of the story. Chronological order rarely works in news stories, whether it's the lead or the whole story itself. In this example, the original version starts out with how they started out the meeting and basically follows the agenda. If you've ever been to one of these sorts of meetings, city council meetings, school board meetings, etc., you'll find that they actually deal with the big issues later on at the meeting, if not at the end. We want to focus on what actually happened. Important. An agenda lead focuses on when and where something takes place. In this example, it says that last weekend the women's volleyball team participated in the playoffs, but as a reader, you want to know what happened. That's what happens in the revised version. Good tip for these: if a lead reads like it was written before an event took place, not a good sign. A label lead mentions a topic but doesn't say what happened or what was done about it. Don't say that the city council discussed ways to regulate a new topless club in the city. Say what they decided to do, or that they decided not to do anything. Remember, always say what happened, not that something happened. Hopefully it's obvious that we don't want to mislead our readers. Remember, a lead sets the tone of a story, whether it's a serious story or a whimsical story. In this example, it's a serious story and shouldn't have a lighthearted lead. The most important thing to do when writing leads is to remember your readers. Think about what's going to interest them or affect them. If you write that 2 policy resolutions will come before the Student Senate this week, no one's going to read that. But if you write that these proposals would raise fees by more than $100 per year, people are going to be interested.